Hello everyone, I'm Vandana Slatter, State Representative in the 48th Legislative District, representing parts of Bellevue, parts of Redmond, and parts of Kirkland, Points communities, and Clyde Hill and Medina. I'm really excited to be here today with my good friend, Representative Timm Ormsby from Spokane, who chairs the Appropriations Committee. I'm really glad that you're able to set some time, some few minutes aside to speak with me today.
My pleasure, Representative Slatter. We are state representatives, and you as the chair of higher ed know full well we have to have a state perspective. And while you're from Bellevue and I'm from Spokane, we have many shared interests that we want to improve the lives of Washingtonians. So it's very, very much my pleasure to join you.
Thank you. We all have stories that bring us to public service, and I have learned a little bit about your story and feel that it's particularly unique and emblematic of even some of our constituents. And I wondered if you could share a little bit about what brought you to public service.
I'm very reluctant, not about serving the public,
Right.
but being in a higher profile role as opposed to just being an advocate. I did not see that for myself. My wife and I were convinced otherwise some years back, and when I arrived, I understood the system felt comfortable to me, and the job is making decisions and weighing both sides of an argument and landing on a position that you can go home and explain to your constituents.
I appreciate that. Did you grow up in Spokane?
I grew up in Spokane, born and raised there. Did not take a path of higher education, for example.
I know, I'm quite fascinated by that.
So I had a family very young,
Yeah.
as a very young person, and my responsibility was to make sure they were cared for.
Yeah.
And so I got into the trades.
Excellent.
Eventually became a concrete finisher, a cement mason, and very fulfilling because it was an actual tangible
Yeah.
thing that you could see at the end of the day that wasn't there at the beginning of the day. And I find public policy is very similar. The preparation is very important. You work with very crude materials and you have to shine them up. Concrete, like good public policy, is straight, level, and smooth.
Wow.
And that's a lot of what we do here. And so the circumstances where I find myself in this role don't feel entirely unsimilar to ones I did finishing concrete.
Wow, I never thought of public policy as concrete, but it is moldable to some degree.
Yes.
And then it has to hold its own structure, doesn't it?
And it sticks around for quite a while. So
Yes,
you want
it
to make
did.
sure you want to make sure you do it right.
Oh, that's fascinating. Well, one question we frequently get with regards to the operating budget, because as a chair of appropriations, I get to interact with you because we talk about where our money goes and how do we actually fund all of these policies. And I guess who better than the chair to answer where the money goes? I suspect you get this question a lot, but I wonder if you could respond to it for my constituents.
And I think of the budget as a statement of our collective values. So it's quite a process-driven way that we get to our spending plan. As you know, as a member of House Appropriations Committee, the laborious hours and the
Yes.
amount of time we consider policy and budget items. And I come at it from a fairly simple perspective, is that proportionally, we have to invest in the residents of Washington State in a number of areas, whether it's education from our earliest learners to those returning to community college
Yeah, thank you.
later in life. Education is a lifelong journey,
Yes.
and learning is good, and we want to encourage curiosity, and we want to encourage folks to find the full measure of themselves. And the thing that we do with the state budget primarily is buy time. We buy time for children to grow up in a healthy environment. We buy time for them to learn, to interact, to develop social skills. We buy time for families to be able to get through tough times. We buy time for folks to get well, to get healthy. And we have to do those things in proportion because, as you know, in your experience, particularly in appropriations, all things are connected. And we can't ignore one component of this very connected system. It will not help us resolve the problem that we're trying to solve.
Thank you. 33 legislators serve on the Appropriations Committee, and there's a lot of points of view. And one of the things I hear in your answer is about maintaining an infrastructure so people can thrive. But it's also about balance and striking that balance, because there are people who worry about the investments that we're making that might be over the amount that they want to spend and those who feel it's under. And yet there's also really important policy considerations from every single person on the committee. And I know you've said that many times in the committee, that everyone has really great ideas. But how do you achieve sort of a balance so that, how do you listen to all of these point of views? Because I think that makes our budget stronger.
I agree that it does make our budget stronger, and I think my number one priority is be an active listener to what happens in committee and all the points of view that we get when we're not in committee, our internal discussions, and good communication with the ranking member. With the Democrats being in the majority in the House, the Democrats have the gavel in committee. Being respectful and honoring the minority is something I learned a long time ago. The voice of the minority is very important in decision making, and we try and be collaborative and inclusive, knowing that we're not going to agree. You and I don't agree on all things, but we come to a place where we understand each other and we can move forward and continue developing policy that improves the lives of the people we're here to represent.
That's really helpful, because I know we represent different districts, and a lot of times the needs in our district and the voices in our district are not always aligned with other districts. So it's really great to hear about that. And actually that was a question that I had about collaboration, because right now in society, in the media, there's this perception that government is deeply divided. And yet, in order to advance a budget, we have to in fact collaborate to some degree.
Yes.
And so in some ways, it's not completely accurate in the state legislature that we are always completely divided. So many bills that we pass and so many policies that we pass are actually bipartisan. In fact, I have a statistic that 76% of all the bills we have passed so far this year have received strong bipartisan support. You just talked a little bit about collaborating, recognizing the minority party's point of view, but can you just speak about how other people might be perceiving our government as being divided, and yet how we're actually working?
We are not paralyzed as they are in Washington, D.C. We're very proactive in moving forward, doing the next thing that we're responsible for doing, sticking to our strict timelines and deadlines that we have.
Yes, you do stick to those. I've noticed that when you're on the committee.
And I think it's part of the function of knowing that we have a timeline that we have to adhere to, but also being respectful in our listening and taking action and accounting for each other's humanity. We're not robots. We are people with strong emotional connections and attachments and feelings, and that has to be acknowledged. So the pace at which we do this has to be digestible to everyone. Every member of the Appropriations Committee, every member of the chamber that we're sitting above got here because they were chosen by their respective districts to come and represent that community voice here. Each one of them has every right to voice that opinion, and we structure it within the rules and decorum of this august body, and we need to reflect that in our committee work as well.
Yeah, it's an honor and privilege to be here. I know when I first joined, and I'm not that well versed in football, but to me, it felt like I was joining the Seahawks. I was drafted to the Seahawks, an amazing team. And one of the reasons why I really want to share your experience and working with you and with other legislators is because I think that we are kind of a team that work together, and even with the other side, you know, in order to pass through policy. So it's been just a really interesting time to meet with you and chat with you about this. It's sometimes we don't get this break to be able to relay this type of information to our constituents. So thank you so much for your time today.
It's been absolutely my pleasure, Representative Slatter, and I appreciate you using a football metaphor. If I had a knitting metaphor I could come up with to share, I think I would do it, but I'm not a very good knitter.
Oh, well, I think you knit together a budget very well. How about that?
We're certainly trying, and the most important thing, as you know, is communication.
Yeah.
How we interact with each other as individuals and as groups, and getting those opinions out there and valued.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad to introduce you to my my own community, and appreciate your time today.
And I would just say the residents of the 48th District are very well represented
Oh.
in Olympia, and you're a perfect shining example of why.
Thank you everyone for joining me today so that I can share some of my experiences in the legislature with great people that I get to serve with, and follow all the action on TVW if you want to learn more. Thank you.